Have you ever asked yourself, should I give money to this homeless person? Won't they just use it for alcohol or drugs? Aren't most homeless just lazy or mentally ill anyway? They're beyond my ability to help. Isn't there a service that can help them? Would I actually be helping or just enabling? We have asked these questions too, and here's what we discovered. Most people are surprised to learn that only 18% of homeless have substance abuse issues, and only 23% suffer from mental illness. Most homeless are not lazy and are actively seeking jobs. 50% of homeless are families, and 44% are women. And the main cause of homelessness is not laziness or addiction, but rather unemployment. This doesn't match our typical image of the homeless. So let's break it down and see why this is. 56%, over half of all Americans, are living paycheck to paycheck. If they lose their job, which is the number one cause of homelessness, they usually lose their ability to pay for housing, especially in places where rent has risen exponentially. Many people have a loving safety net of friends and family to fall back on until they get back on their feet. However, not everyone is blessed with this, and they can find themselves suddenly immersed in homelessness, at times sleeping on the street and dependent on the generosity of strangers. Though quite challenging and humbling, one can find the resources needed to get back on their feet. Their experience of homelessness, however difficult, will be a temporary one, and this is true for 80 to 90% of people who experience homelessness. However, there are homeless that seem to be unable to bounce back from the humbling and at times inhumane experience of homelessness. These are the chronically homeless. They are often the people you see on the street corners with signs. They may suffer from addiction or mental illness. They may just be beaten down by life, and their spirits are simply broken. Many, through lack of hope and an acceptance of defeat, stop looking for a job or applying for housing. Among service agencies, the chronically homeless are infamously known as service resistant, those who tend to refuse help, except maybe cash from you. While the chronically homeless are a fraction of the homeless population, they are often the most visible, and they're the ones that make the problem of homelessness seem so hopeless. In not actively addressing and helping to break the cycle of chronic homelessness, economic consequences also arise. Studies have shown that it is disproportionately costlier to sustain a chronically homeless person than it is a typical homeless person. With emergency room visits, shelters, and other expenses, one chronically homeless person can cost a city $45,000 a year, and in many cases, $100,000 or more. But if the chronically homeless are service resistant, how do we reach them? How do we help them break the cycle? Whether by their own doing, that of others, or because of a disease, the chronically homeless have been reduced to degrading themselves so far as to eat out of garbage cans when necessary. According to one friend on the street, who recovered from chronic homelessness, once you have to engage yourself in such a degrading experience in order to survive, you have to make yourself okay with it and accept it as your reality. However, once you do accept that as your reality, it is a reality that is hard to come back from, and so isolation occurs. This isolation causes separation from society, and in some cases, homeless may not even hear their own name for months at a time. Mother Teresa traveled the world experiencing every kind of poverty, yet she was convinced that the greatest poverty was in the West, the poverty of loneliness. To be loved is to be known, and when the chronically homeless are forgotten, they're separated from the experience of love itself. Christ tells us, the good shepherd goes after his lost sheep. He will leave the 99 to go after the one. In this case, the 90% to go after the 10%. But who is going after the broken, the isolated, the vulnerable, those lost sheep of God? Normal approaches to homelessness are not reaching the chronically homeless, so the problem grows. We're seeing the chronic population getting larger, more visible, and more desperate. This leaves those of us who care overwhelmed and confused on how best to help. A new approach is needed. If we seek to be like Christ, we can't leave his most hopeless children abandoned and alone. But who has the time, the ability, and the means to do this? Throughout the history of the church, when a problem arises, God raises up an individual or a group of individuals to counter it. Generous young people from around the world are volunteering with Christ in the City, giving 1 or 2 years of their life to serve not just the homeless, but the chronically homeless. These volunteers are paid nothing. The rooms are shared by multiple people, and they live off food donations from the communities in which they serve. They detach from many of the comforts they once knew. The work is hard, but as you will hear them say, the gain is worth much more than what they gave up to do it. At Christ in the City, we devote ourselves fully to pioneering a new approach addressing chronic homelessness in Denver and preventing it from growing. We know we cannot give what we do not have, so we work tirelessly to know the resources available for the homeless in Denver. Our missionaries enter into deep intellectual, human, and spiritual formation. They're filled with the love of Christ in the sacraments and through living in community. Then, in teams of 2 or 3, they walk the same street route daily, all year, befriending the chronically homeless they meet. Through consistent contact, trust is developed and real friendship occurs. As we grow in relationship with our friends on the street, a reconciliation with society begins. We invite our friends on the street into community at our weekly lunch in the parks. Because we know them, it is not strangers feeding strangers, but a friend helping a friend. We also invite the greater community to join us in service and at lunch in the park. Hundreds of college students from all around the country opt to spend their spring break serving alongside us as well. In this way, Christ in the City helps Christians fulfill their God-given call not just to serve the poor, but to know them and love them also. Not being properly understood, the chronically homeless population has at times been ignored by society, including Christians. But not anymore. This problem is now meeting its match. At Christ in the City, we don't seek simply to serve the service resistant. That doesn't work. We seek to know and to love them. So when the opportunities arise, we are ready to serve with knowledge of the resources available and a willingness to walk with our homeless friends. We know not everyone can volunteer a year, a week, or even join us for lunch in the park, but we can all begin to bridge the societal gap by how we interact with the homeless we encounter. So, the next time you encounter homeless at a stoplight, ask the person's name. One friend on the street told us he went 4 months without hearing his own name. Asking their name, their hometown, or about their interests or hobbies will validate that they are a person. Mother Teresa said, "Many people talk about the homeless, but few talk to them." Reach out and offer a handshake. It's a simple gesture, but it will break the barrier and express that you recognize their dignity. A moment of awkwardness for you may be the highlight of their day. In lieu of money, give socks, gloves, water, or Gatorade. Socks are an incredibly welcome commodity on the street, and Gatorade or water helps avoid dehydration. Without giving money, you're thoughtfully showing compassion and that you care in other ways. Offer soft food. Many of our friends on the street have teeth problems and don't benefit from foods like granola bars or apples. So soft foods like bananas or soft-baked granola bars are appreciated. Offer to pray for them and mean it. We try to be another Christ to our friends on the street, but we accept that we can only do so much. The rest, we leave up to God in prayer. The only cure for a lack of love is love, and that is our primary mission. And we know not everyone can volunteer full-time, but we can financially partner with those who do, and we can get involved where and when we can. Will you join us in our mission to know, to love, and to serve the poorest of the poor, the broken, the forgotten, the chronically homeless, or, as we call them, our friends?